In 2024, Iran's oil production hit a 46-year high. Revenue from energy exports soared to $78 billion, the highest in over a decade. And its biggest customer, China, America's top strategic rival. How is this even possible? How does a country under such heavy sanctions manage to become one of the fastest growing energy exporters in the world? To answer that, we need to go beyond the usual headlines and follow the oil. Sanctions were supposed to cripple Iran's economy. But 17 years after the first round of major US sanctions in the year 2006, Iran's oil exports are more than just intact. They're booming. The reason? A shadow economy that's become shockingly efficient. Let's start with the numbers. In 2020, Iran's energy exports brought in just $18 billion. 4 years later, that number quadrupled. And it's not just crude oil. Iran has quietly diversified, ramping up production of condensates and natural gas liquids like ethane, propane, and butane. These byproducts aren't just valuable, they're harder to trace, easier to blend, and often fall into gray zones of global trade. But behind every booming sector, there's a silent partner. And in Iran's case, that partner wears a uniform. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, isn't just a military force. It's an economic empire. Over the past decade, the IRGC has developed refineries, ports, and logistics chains across Iran, specifically built to bypass Western control. They control pipelines, they run oil terminals, they even operate their own fleet of ships, ghost tankers that disappear and reappear in international waters with transponders turned off. And their crown jewel, the South Pars gas field, the largest in the world. Shared with Qatar, this offshore treasure trove accounts for 2/3 of Iran's gas production. The IRGC has used it to power Iran's rise as the world's third largest gas producer, right behind the US and Russia. But pumping oil is one thing, selling it is another. So who's buying Iranian oil in 2025? The answer, increasingly, is the one country Washington can't pressure: China. While the US Treasury chokes off dollar transactions, China has created a parallel financial universe. Iranian oil is now traded in yuan, settled through Chinese banks, and shipped via a complex network of front companies, transshipment points, and rebranded cargo. Much of it is relabeled as Iraqi, Malaysian, or even Omani oil. Some tankers switch flags mid-sea. Others never enter Chinese ports officially, instead offloading in bonded zones or anchoring offshore to refuel other ships. According to ship tracking firm Kepler, Chinese imports of Iranian crude doubled between 2022 and 2024, reaching 17.8 million barrels per day. And yet, Chinese customs haven't recorded a single barrel from Iran since 2022. This is diplomacy by disguise. Trade without traceability.
Well, I think the Iranian, over the sanctions imposed by the United States over the years, they have learned the tricks how to avoid and be elusive in getting their oil sold without the American sanction. Because you remember after the 2015, when the nuclear deal was signed and Iran left most of the country, lifted gradually the sanction on Iran. Then President Trump came in 2018 and he imposed a full, more harsh sanction on Iran, especially in the oil export. So Iran have found a very different way of non-traditional method of sending the oil either to China or to other countries, using Iraq, one of the countries main, and sometimes using ships, which also take the oil and deliver to the destination. So all this has been successfully in doing all this to avoid the American sanctions.
So what happened to American sanctions? The short answer, they stopped working. The long answer is more dangerous, for US foreign policy particularly. In Washington, sanctions were once seen as the ultimate tool of leverage, a way to punish bad actors without boots on the ground. But analysts are now sounding the alarm. Sanctions exist only on paper if the world's second largest economy refuses to enforce them. In reality, Sanctions work only if everyone plays along. And increasingly, that's not the case. Countries like Russia, Venezuela, North Korea, and now Iran have built an informal alliance of sanctioned states, trading with each other, using non-dollar systems, and developing infrastructure outside US control. Their argument, including that of India's, that they do not agree with country-based sanctions, that they only accept and endorse international organizations, particularly the UN sanctions.
You see, the point I must explain to you here is that ever since the Iranian Revolution has came in 1979, the US imposed sanctions on Iran. And despite all the American sanctions, you saw Iran was able to improve its infrastructure, improve its military arsenals, improve its economy, and even improve the oil sectors in the infrastructure where they were able to develop. So therefore, Iran has been able to avoid the American sanctions. And secondly, with the growing non-dependence, de-dollarization of the world away from the American currency, using either some kind of cryptocurrency or using the bilateral deal with countries and your local currency, I think they have succeeded in many ways in gaining access and able to sell their oil in the region. And however, the United States also sometimes closed its eyes on certain shipment, because Iran threatened many times that if you don't allow my oil to leave the Strait of Hormuz, Iran may close the Strait of Hormuz. For that sense, I think the American and the Western world is avoiding that kind of a pressure from Iran. And we can see after the Ukraine war, Russian oil have reduced dramatically to the European country. So most of the European countries currently are also dependent on the GCC and the Iranian oil indirectly. So they're buying. So therefore, I think there is a huge success for the Iranian in that sector. So it's more of a symbolic and more of a unilateral sanctions, because this is not an internationally legitimized kind of a sanction to the UN Security Council or so, but it is just a unilateral decision, and not many countries abiding by the US unilateral decision.
On the 4th of July, Trump administration imposed a fresh round of sanctions, this time on a smuggling network that disguises Iranian oil as Iraqi. They also targeted a Hezbollah-linked bank in Lebanon. But in Tehran, these measures barely registered, because the new oil empire doesn't run through the dollar, it runs through Beijing. While Washington, D.C. debates morality, China is securing supply. Chinese refineries are now optimized to process Iranian crude. State-backed insurers cover ghost ships. Tech platforms like WeChat are used for encrypted payment confirmations. Even port authorities turn a blind eye because cheap oil fuels Chinese industry. In return, Iran gets billions in investment, access to Chinese technology, and political cover at the United Nations Security Council. It's not just business, it's alignment. This is a sanctions-proof system, and Iran helped build it. And it gets even more strategic, because this isn't just about exporting oil, it's about dictating terms. Iran has already begun drafting a national hydrocarbon strategy, not just focused on volume, but value. That includes building domestic refining capacity, expanding liquefied natural gas, that's LNG infrastructure, and using energy to build diplomatic leverage across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And with Western companies banned, it's Chinese firms, state-backed giants like Sinopec and CNPC, that are stepping in to build Iran's energy future. This cooperation extends beyond the Gulf. Iran and China are linking energy deals to the Belt and Road Initiative, giving Iran a central role in China's Eurasian strategy. Meanwhile, in Washington, critics of sanctions are growing louder. From think tanks to former officials, many now admit the truth. Sanctions haven't stopped Iran's economy. They've reshaped it and in some ways made it stronger. Iran's experience with sanctions has created a new kind of resilience.